You know, with motocross, I mean, if you don't get hurt during the weekend, then you didn't ride hard enough.
The flying freckle, Jeff.
Shoot, who is this kid?
He could ride a good bike very fast. He could ride a poor bike as fast as it could be ridden.
God, he could win on anything.
He was tougher than a $2 steak.
For a little guy, he was a real strong son of a gun.
He was like royalty.
Jeff Ward was born in Glasgow, Scotland on June 22, 1961. From the birth of mini-cycle racing, Jeff embodied the motorsport spirit, clawing his way forward. 7 national championships later, the claws had just gotten sharper. This is Jeff Ward's motocross file.
We moved over to California when I was 2, and my dad started riding over here, and then I just started riding with him. Got a mini bike pretty quick because we got pictures of me in the backyard doing laps and donuts around the backyard on a Honda Mini Trail 50, and it had 4.5 on it because that was my age.
The desire for speed had to make its way from the slow rules of the trials course.
I had more fun going faster between the sections, you know, see how fast I could beat my dad to the next one.
Jack Ward soon found several outlets for his son's growing passion and skill.
Well, we used to ride at Saddleback Park. My dad and a couple other guys started a series of mini bike races in the parking lot. We just broke ground there, and then Saddleback Park kind of built a mini bike track for us.
Pretty much a big helmet with some legs coming out of it.
In front, between us, was this washout. I see this kid coming and I don't see him slowing down, you know. I say, oh, this kid is gonna eat it. I was freaking just at the idea, you know. And as he came close, he just lifted the front and hopped over that thing. Shoot, who is this kid?
In the early days of the sport, there were always cameras around. On one particular Sunday in 1970, a camera focused its lens on the 8-year-old Ward and his Honda 50.
So I was just blitzing around and doing wheelies and just messing around, and there was this guy on this trials bike, kind of copied what he did, and these guys were waving at me and telling me to go do it again, go do it again. So I just kept doing it 5 or 6 times, and I peeled out of there and got bored and took off and went to the movie to watch On Any Sunday, and about 5 minutes in there I was.
1973, and the launch of one of Honda's most popular bikes ever. The Flying Freckle was soon to be a national name.
They were bringing the bike out for the first time, and I'm out there waiting, and they bring this big giant semi. Comes in the pits, and we're like, who's that for? You know, and it says Honda on the side, and you know, they open up the back door, and the only thing in the whole semi was the XR75 sitting in the back. That was it, nothing else.
He was Honda's factory XR75 guy, probably sold 2 million XR75s.
They had posters of me in Cycle News, and you know, they did a pretty big push on advertising on this XR75, so that really is what got my name out there.
But as Ward's skill and determination grew, the competition just got faster. The 4-stroke Hondas were not going to get the job done if Ward wanted to be a champion.
We were talking with Suzuki, and they had plans of, you know, taking me pro and running the bigger bikes. You know, I won, I think, everything that year on that bike. So it basically jump-started my career into the AMA Pro Racing.
1978. With his mini-cycle days behind him, the diminutive Ward would struggle on the bigger bikes of the pro ranks. However, his seasoned abilities would soon give him the confidence and send him to the next level.
I just raced Hangtown for my first national and got lapped. It was, you know, a real eye-opener and devastating, kind of. And then the next week at Racing World, which is a place I practiced a lot, I finished second overall there. That was like the eye-opening that I can do this.
Yamaha would give Jeff a taste of what a factory bike could do at the end of the 1978 season. Going back to stock bikes was not an option.
First race on it, I led the first moto to the last corner, and Galen Mosier got by me. So I almost won my first moto first time on this bike. So then I was with Yamaha thinking everything was going to be good for next year, and then they called a couple months later and said they couldn't get me works bikes for the following. I said, I can't race production bikes. I went out riding, and Weiner was out there, and I'm riding with him, and we stop, and he's like, what are you doing? I go, I don't know. Yamaha's not giving me works bikes. I'm not going to ride for him next year. So that's how I got my deal with Kawasaki from Jimmy going down there and saying, sign this kid.
But Jeff's first race with Kawasaki would teach him a lesson that he would never forget, a lesson that he would build his career around.
I was up front. I may have been leading the race. Through a hoop section, I jumped out in the front end, went over the berm, and I couldn't pull it back up. You know, it wasn't that I couldn't get on the bike or start it. It was just I wasn't strong yet. You know, my dad started telling me, they got to move around the same bike that you got to move around. If it's 200 pounds, it's 200 pounds to them, and it's 200 pounds to you. So, you better get stronger than those guys to be able to beat them.
He took the smallest package and built it into the strongest package.
Jeff was teamed up with Mike McAndrews. The mechanic knew Jeff had what it would take.
Wardy lands off a jump, and as he lands, he hits something and shears the hose off the rear shock. But all of a sudden I see this thing just out of control. And all of a sudden I'm noticing, his body shifting his body around. He's short shifting the motor, keeping the torque curve, not wringing it out as much. He's doing all these things. And the bike starts looking good. And I'm thinking it can look good. There's no freaking oil in the shock.
I wasn't a picky rider. If my bike didn't work that good on that bump, then I didn't hit that bump. I went somewhere else.
For Jeff and Kawasaki, 1979 through 1982 were building years for both his talent and their technology.
There wasn't Kawasaki on the track. I was the only Kawasaki for like 4 years. Nobody rode a Kawasaki. Nobody.
The harder he worked, the harder I worked. The harder I worked on the bikes, the harder he would work in training.
Every Thursday when Jeff would leave for the race, he'd bring his bike in and the tire would be completely worn out in 1 week.
They were all scared to go train with me.
It was kind of hard to hang out with him because he just did stuff I didn't want to do,
I rode every day.
After being on a Kawasaki for 4 years, Ward would finally win the 1983 CMC Golden State Championship.
It was a big deal for Kawasaki because they hadn't really won anything yet and, on their bike, and it was getting better, and that proved that we had a good bike.
That 82 and 83 year was sort of the preparation for, what he was to become, what he needed to do to become a champion.
With 1983 behind him, 1984 brought on a new challenge for Jeff, his first rival, the O Show, Johnny O'Mara.
You hear about this guy, Johnny O'Mara, he's all white and the gaiters on.
I mean, they were going back and forth every weekend, and I know they were both giving it everything they had.
The 1984 125cc series would be a battle for the ages between Ward and O'Mara. It would come down to the last race on August 19th in Washougal, Washington.
Every week was a battle. They were swapping off, they were banging bars.
He would always win the first moto, and then I won the second moto, so we'd tie him points, but I'd always get the overall, so it was a real frustrating year for Johnny. I had a 20-point lead, so I didn't have to beat him. I'm just going to let him go by right in front of everybody so he doesn't try to take me out.
And he just literally pulled out of a berm and made it so obvious that he's letting me by.
Waving him by with my hand on the throttle. Next thing you know, he comes straight up and just takes out my front end. So I go down.
I would have rather had him just let me by in the back where no one sees.
Everybody sees it all. The mechanics are going at it.
He was going to go over and, I don't know if he could kick his ass, but he was sure going to try it.
It went from just going to be a conservative day to a full blown out fight to the end, which was probably dumb on my part because I could have thrown it away at any time, but smart on his part to get me to do that.
There was ugly times for sure, but it's just because we both wanted the big picture, and that was to be #1.
It was real exciting to be able to win the championship for him, and rewarding for me to get that first one. It just felt like it was never going to happen. Lucky I had somebody like Kawasaki that believed in me, that otherwise I could have been just spit out the back door and been done.
Sweden, 1984, a day of perhaps motocross perfection at the Motocross of Nations for Ward representing the United States.
It was like a dream. It's like a dream. Even DeCoster was there in practice, says, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He goes, you're like 5 seconds a lap faster than anybody on the track. And I wasn't even riding hard. I won both motos, almost lapped second place. If you could have that every day, you would have never lost a race in your life.
1985 would see Jeff move to the 250cc class permanently, winning Kawasaki's first 250 outdoor national title and his first Supercross championship, but not without controversy.
Whoever won that night would win the title between myself, Brock, and Jeff.
I went in 2 points ahead of Brock. The first heat race I went down, bike landed on this jump, facing backwards, the clutch was broken, so I put it in neutral and rolled down the jump, bump started and turned around within like maybe 10 feet. We're hearing rumors about protests, and I'm getting disqualified, and I'm like, for what?
The AMA referee at the time, understanding the magnitude of the event, said, well, in the AMA rulebook we get to fine the rider or disqualify him. With that infraction, we think we'll fine him.
So the last moto basically was whoever beat one another, no matter where you finished on the track, was going to win the championship. Came across the line and there's pictures, you know, I'm jumping in Brock's wheels at my back wheel.
We knew what was going to happen. I mean, Kenny Clark came right up to me, shook my hand, said, congratulations, but I'm going to take this thing away from you. And well, you got to do what you got to do.
We go to a hearing and we present our side, and Roy Turner presented Kawasaki's side.
They certainly pushed it right to the end to try to just use a rule in order to take the championship away.
With Wardy on his way, Mike McAndrews knew it was time for him to put the pit board away.
You didn't want to admit it, but you knew there was 3 or 4 other guys that could be Jeff Ward's mechanic. But I knew there was only one guy that could be Dana and Kristen McAndrews' dad. They had sacrificed a lot to allow me to achieve the goals with Jeff.
1986 for Jeff was plagued with mechanical problems, a strange Supercross point system, and a challenging 500cc Kawasaki.
It started off bad. Anaheim had the #1 plate on, heat race, throttle cable broke, and went home. There was no semi for the last 3 guys, so I broke on the first lap, so I was done. That set the tone, and we kept fighting, and we'd have a problem, and just could never catch up, in points.
1987 would be different for Jeff and everyone involved in the sport.
Then you can see the expression on the course marshals that are out there, and you knew that it was serious.
The early season of 1987 was full of optimism for Ward and his fellow competitor, Honda's David Bailey. But it would be shattered in Huron, California at a preseason race.
Just kind of going around the track, not at speed. I saw David go into a turn, he comes out. 2 little, almost speed bumps by today's standards. Came up short, kicked him.
He went down and that was it. Broke his back and that was the end of his career.
There was this brat pack of guys that were young kids coming up with a dream, and David was one of them. We all worked together and fought each other and learned from each other and pushed each other, and then to have that happen was probably the worst day, of my career, really.
Every time those guys step on and start going, it can happen.
With his head back in the game, the 1987 Supercross season started off again with a scare. But Jeff prevailed over a new rival, Honda's tough Ricky Johnson.
Ricky got knocked out at Anaheim, and we had a big scare because that was the year, just 3 weeks after David was paralyzed, and Ricky went down on the second triple jump and laid there motionless for 10 minutes. I'd get hurt, he'd win. He'd get hurt, I'd win. It was just like the whole time for like 4 years. If one of us wasn't there during our career, we'd have like 15 championships.
When he clicked with the track, nobody could touch him. And I had those days that I couldn't touch him.
Johnson was ticked off. He was madder than hell. And I went up to him afterward. I say, man, it was a great race. He says, I'm going to kick that little midget's next time.
Ward's rivalry with RJ was fierce, and it didn't end in front of 40,000 stadium fans.
I roll in by myself. He's by himself.
He comes in about 3 laps into my moto. There's this road jump that goes up the hill and comes down the hill, and I'm coming up when he's coming down, and right then the race is on.
So we're going back and forth, back and forth. He's making a little time with me, I make a little time with him. But this is just, no one's seeing it. It's just for ego.
For 50 minutes, we didn't give each other a foot.
His bike ran out of gas and he had to push it.
I pulled in, and Ricky was not going to pull in because he knew I did 3 laps earlier. So he was going to finish those 3 laps because he would know I knew that I did 3 more laps than him. Didn't even wave when we left. Drove out.
Jeff would win the 1988 250 outdoor title, but a dislocated ankle would give the Supercross title to his Honda rival.
Ricky was running better than me in the Nationals that year. I think he may have got hurt, so I won. In motocross, if you don't get hurt during the weekend, then you didn't ride hard enough.
After years of riding the big 500s, in 1989, Jeff Ward became the first and only rider in history to win national titles in all 3 classes of motocross, plus Supercross.
I wouldn't have assumed that he would have been this awesome 500 guy because he's kind of small.
He could go around the corner with his feet on the pegs and just, like slowly drifted in just with the throttle without putting his foot out.
Wardy knew that championships weren't only won on the track. He was the image of the physically fit racer.
Motocross is a finesse sport. but when you miss something or when you crash, it's a power sport.
The bike was laying in the berm, but his body was outside of the berm, and he just grabbed himself and like with one clean swoop, whipped his body back around, and now he could stand it up, jump on it, and go.
You know, it wasn't until later in my career when I hooked up with Jeff Spencer. I'd go practice down in Carlsbad, which was about 45 miles, and then I'd drive up to Pasadena, which is about an hour and a half the other way. So then I'd work out for 2 to 3 hours with Jeff, and then I'd drive back home and get me home about 10 o'clock at night. I liked winning, you know, and that's what I had to do to get there. That's what I was going to do.
Jeff would defend his 1990 500cc title for his 7th national championship, tying Ricky Johnson and Bob Hanna's records. But the years were adding up for Wardy as he looked down the backside of his long career.
You're trying to learn new ways of keeping up with guys that are 18 years old, 19 years old, you know, and injuries start creeping up. You know, I had to learn how to skate hoops, and I had to learn how to scrub this, and I had to learn how to, you know, they all came in with something from the mini bike ranks that they've learned that we hadn't done yet.
1991 showed that Wardy still had it, but another motocross generation was coming into its own.
Damon Bradshaw clipped me, and I went down. I got up dead last, and I had to lead by just after halfway. Past Stanton and won. The second one I won by 30 seconds. So I was like riding so well.
The excitement of the motocross track made weekends worthwhile, but it was the between race recovery that was finally taking its toll.
I'd go straight from a national and I'd blow up my ankle, and I'd go right to Pasadena to the doctor we had up there, and I'd go right on the ultrasound machine and the dialotherm machine 24/7 for a week. I never went home, and it was miserable. I just got burned out of that daily ritual of doing therapy.
In a planned retirement, Jeff Ward quit racing in 1992. The Budds Creek National would see Jeff Ward take his last lap on a motocross track.
I'd been racing 14 years and putting everything I had into it, so it was nice just to not have to, you know, do that, but then again I was kind of lost for a little while.
In 14 years, he had won 7 national championships, 56 AMA nationals, and was on 7 winning U.S. Motocross to Nations teams. 1993, and 23 years since, the lens of Bruce Brown's camera pointed at the small freckle-faced kid riding on his back wheel at Saddleback Park. Now, the most famous racetrack in the world would call his name.
Paul Tracy. Troy Lee painted helmets for Paul. He was just signing with Penske. And we kind of hit it off, and I went to Indy with him, and I'm like, man, I got to be here. Did a few races and turned some heads. It just slowly started happening.
May 27, 1997. With the comfort and the dirt of the motocross track far behind him, the Indy rookie found himself in a familiar position, in unfamiliar surroundings.
You just don't even want to get in the cars, so you're so nervous.
So here I am watching him running, you know, leading it in the top spot, and I'm going, he's going to win the Indianapolis 500.
I led 49 laps in the last, 59 laps of the race.
I was running out of my house with my underpants on, man.
You know, he's new to IndyCar racing, but that he's a cagey old champion.
I was freaking out with 20 laps to go, realizing that I'm a half a track ahead in the Indy 500 and trying to focus on not thinking that I might win this race. I mean, there was hundreds of thousands just cheering, and I thought, I'm like, who are they cheering for? And then I realized, I'm a rookie. It was just so cool that I actually got there and got to do it, and then I did it 6 more times.
The 1997 Indy Rookie of the Year would go on to finish second in 1999. And in his Indianapolis career, he would have 4 top 10 finishes. 2003, and an invitation to ride a new type of motorcycle would launch Wardy into yet another successful motorcycle career.
He called Ricky and Wardy and said, hey, we're going to go out and ride Supermoto. You guys want to go try it?
In 3 months, we went from not knowing what we're doing to racing an AMA, National Series. And it's kind of cool to be able to get back on a bike and actually, win against some pretty young people and some fast talent.
The pass he made on Coombsville was just amazing. I mean, Jeff Ward style again, just an animal, man.
2006 would see the 45-year-old Ward become the oldest gold medalist in X Games history with his Supermoto win. He would also win his 9th national championship with his 2006 AMA Supermoto title.
He's been racing hard since he was, a toddler, and he's still out kicking in people's.
Today, Jeff is rewarded with training for his own Supermoto career while he watches his own kids' motorcycle interests grow, just like Jack Ward did all those years ago.
I'm back in the back working on the bikes every day and taking them riding 4 days a week and racing on the weekend. Motocross is is a part of our life, and my kids, you know, they love it.
Jeff Ward was the iconic image of motocross's youth in the infancy of the sport, and became the most versatile rider the sport has ever seen. His induction to the Motorsports Hall of Fame in 2006 validated his sacrifice and triumphs.
The biggest guy doesn't always win, and Jeff proved that.
You know, in Asia they call a person like him kind of a velvet tiger. He had a very smooth demeanor, a very easygoing personality, but he was a tiger on the track.
He was always solid, you know, kind of the dog on a piece of meat.
If you look under the word racer in the dictionary, there's a picture of Jeff Ward. You put him on a vehicle, he'll race it.
I miss motocross because it was my life, you know. I mean, I wish you could keep racing till you're 80 and being on top, but that's just not what's going to happen. I did as long as I could. Today, I'm still friends with the guys I was 25 years ago. I mean, I still feel like I'm in my heyday. That was probably the first real race bike, was like a SL70 when, and I don't know what year it was, probably 69 or 68. My dad tricked that thing out and took it apart, and I mean, we ran nitro in them and just everything, and they'd blow up all the time. They blew a hole in my leg. The flywheel flew out the side of the bike when it exploded and almost cut my leg off. And so we were experimenting with some pretty big nitro mix, I guess.